Let's go ahead and kick it off with our Seahawks segment. So, as you said, it did seem like they had a good grip on the game for a while there. Unfortunately, they did lose to the New Orleans Saints on Sunday, October 9th. That was a 39-32 loss. Like you said, kind of came late in the game. It looked like they might have had a win. And then in the last quarter there, the Saints take the lead and take the win. So, offensive player of the game for me, I believe you went with Geno Smith last week. I went ahead and chose him this week. He was 16 for 25, had 268 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And I see we're just like swapping here because I think I might have had Tyler Lockett last week.
I think we did change. I think we swapped on Geno and Tyler here. I think you might have talked about it last week, or I might have said it in addition to what you said about Tyler, but he's just obviously been a model of consistency for Seattle here on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously no Russell this year, a guy that those two had a really great connection. So now Geno and him have that connection. It just seemed like the 2 touchdowns that Tyler had, I think the second one was just really in stride, really between a few defenders. I was like, oh man, seeing what he's capable of. I'm curious why you went with Geno, just to hear your reasoning, just because, it's obviously good to get that secondhand input, but I don't blame you. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to blame much of the offensive side of the ball this game, but I am curious for your full reasoning behind selecting Geno, who's coming off of an NFC Offensive Player of the Week award.
Right. So he remains to be consistent weekly, but what I liked this week was that he cleaned it up and had no interceptions this week. I believe he had 1 last week. So that was just super impressive. I mean, if he continues to improve, continues to get, I think it was last week 300 yards, and this week he was just short of that. So yeah, just cleaning that up and not getting an interception, like for me, that was what made the difference. So that's why I chose Geno.
I mean, it makes total sense. So I don't fault you for that. And then this guy's name's been kind of hovering around defensive player of the game for a few weeks now with Tariq Woolen. Just really incredible. I mean, this is a cool stat for him individually, but not necessarily the best for the team. The fact that he's got all 3 of Seattle's interceptions. But I mean, what do you see from Tariq here? Obviously, if we look at the defensive side of the ball, there are the holes. I mean, we look at it just feels like a lot of the times this team gets into shootouts because their defense can't do anything. I mean, you can see here, I wasn't very nice to them in the header here. But Woolen, was a guy in the draft that was viewed as a development project for the longest period of time, a guy that's going to take a few years to really become a corner, a real standout corner. And, they've kind of thrown him into the fire. I know Justin Coleman was on the inactives list, Sidney Jones this week as a healthy scratch. And he's obviously getting playing time for a reason. So what did you see from Tariq?
Again, we'll go back to the consistency. I mean, he's been consistent throughout the first few games of the season. And like you said, it's been the shootout games. Like, I think that's what we can expect moving forward, because it doesn't feel like we're able to stop other teams from scoring. But Tariq is always consistent. And just like you noted here on your stats for him for the game, 4 tackles, 1 interception, 1 pass deflection. Like, he continues to make an impact on defense. And we're going to need that, especially if we continue to do these shootout games.
Yeah, and especially from the cornerback position. I mean, we've talked about Mike Jackson. Obviously, the name is cool, but seen some struggles there. Kobe Bryant has had his moments. I believe he forced a fumble in this game, actually. So it's just interesting to see the young guys get their play, and I think that down the road, I'm sure this will help them just to be able to get this playing time now. But it's also just seeing some of the mistakes that have been made across the board. I know I've been harsh about Cody Barton and just some of the mistake. A lot of his mistakes get put on social media, and you can see whether he's like missing the gap or something. I mean, the rush game, I think, was the bigger issue here. I don't know if
Yeah.
you saw how much Taysom Hill got to do Taysom Hill things. And we haven't even heard of Taysom Hill for a while. I know for the past few years, he's kind of been like, oh, he's a Swiss Army knife for them, but I feel like he's been quiet, and it feels like he just
Hmm.
blew up in this game. So just the run defense has been not good, to just sum it up. In my opinion here, and like you said, I think people are just going to need to step up. Woolen has done his job to an extent. We're just going to need to see who's going to be able to. At some point, you have to be able to get off the field. Seattle ranks really at the bottom of the league or near the bottom of the league in a lot of defensive stats, like most plays allowed per drive, most how many 3-and-outs they get, which is very little, so it's just eventually you got to help your offense out. You got to be able to stick up for yourself on the
Hmm.
defensive side of the ball. It's just like, you might as well just not play defense with how the defensive side of the ball has looked. It's disappointing. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, and like you said, having our offense out there on the field for so long, I mean, we've already kind of seen it, but it also allows for guys to get hurt, and that'll come up
Yep.
here because we do have a pretty big injury report now for this week. So we'll dive into some injury news here. And actives against New Orleans were, like you said, Sidney Jones, Justin Coleman, Tease Tabor, Jake Curran, and Marquise Goodwin and Derek Young. And then injuries that happened in the game. The most notable one I would say was Rashaad Penny getting carted off. So he goes carted off in the third quarter with an ankle injury, deemed doubtful to return. And then later we found out that he has a fractured fibula and will be out indefinitely. If he needs surgery or not will be decided based on test results today. So obviously hoping that it's not the worst that could happen, but I don't know how you could hope for the best with a fracture. So it's
Well,
going to
and
be
then
a
we did
return.
get an update a little bit earlier, about an
Okay.
hour or two ago, that he suffered a broken fibula, is what the tests show, and that it will require surgery and he's done for the year, which with him is just really tough. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of the year. Did we, even in the off season, right, Bell, with the running
Staying
back
healthy.
room? I know that I had my reservations about the Ken Walker pick because of where it was, and you know, whatever strategy, if it would have gone differently. But now Ken Walker will get much more of an opportunity. I think he had a
Yeah.
69-yard touchdown in this game. But it's just really tough. I mean, we look at the other guys like Chris Carson. I mean, just the running backs since Marshawn Lynch, Thomas Rawls, CJ Procise, God, Chris Carson now. I'm hoping the best for Chris
Yeah.
because obviously the neck injury. Even Marshawn at the end of his career, a guy who was hardly ever injured, had a hernia issue during his final times here in Seattle. So, it's really tough because, I know there have been things about, Penny where he doesn't stay healthy, which, I admittedly have been a proponent of that. I'm like, hey, man, the dude
Yeah.
can't stay healthy. If he can't be available in any sport, if you can't be available, I'm less inclined to give you playing time. It's just like with
Sure.
Christian McCaffrey. I don't draft him in fantasy just because I'm just so used to him going down. It's just at some point I get scared of your availability. And this really sucks. And I just hope that, Ken Walker will be able to shine as best as he can. I know that our offensive line has been dealing with some issues too, injury wise, with a few guys. But I mean, I just hope that DJ Dallas is able to get some solid play. I know I talked about him a lot in the preseason, and I hope he can get some shine. But I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's just kind of like, oh man, and you just feel for the guy because I think we talked about it in the first few games. If he can get going like he did at the end of the year, obviously great run game, and it felt
Hmm.
like the last few games he really was kind of hitting the stride, at least in my opinion. And now it's like, all right, well, he's done, and he has to go through that rehab again. And I know that can wear a lot on your mental health, to just have to deal with that rehab again, to go down that road, to have to miss this time, with your guys in the locker room. So it's really tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, I think he knew it was bad getting carted off. I mean, obviously in pain, tears rolling down his cheeks. I can only imagine how he felt in that moment and like you said, mentally. So Yes, I agree. He has been big for our offense, and it's going to hurt to not have him on the field. So it'll be interesting to see how Walker does fill in that position. But I know that some people also think that Walker is a dark horse and can fill in the role. So hopefully things are good moving forward. But yeah, it's tough news for Penny. I was always in his corner, so it's very tough to hear. We also had Gabe Jackson, who was questionable to return with a hip flexor, leaving in the third quarter. Penny Hart is out with a hamstring injury, and Al Woods left the game and did not return with a knee injury. So getting hit by the injury bug there last week. We move on to some more positive news here with some team notes. On the 5th, Geno Smith was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. On his way to posting back-to-back 300-yard games for the first time in his career, Smith completed 23 of 30 passes for 320 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 132.6 passer rating. Smith also rushed for 49 yards and a score on 7 carries. It would have been a career best 51 yards on 5 carries if not for 2 kneel downs at the end of the game. We're 4 games into the season. Smith leads the NFL with a 77.3% completion percentage, the highest mark through a quarterback's first 4 games in league history. Minimum 125 attempts. Smith's 108 passer rating ranks 3rd in the league. So again, he's doing great. There was that week that was a bump in the road against San Francisco, but it looks like he's picked it up and he's improving. So it's exciting to see.
It's did I apologize after the Broncos game? Because I think I was like, all right, it's going to be Drew Lock. And, it's been really interesting because now there's these debates where it's like, does Geno Smith stay Seattle's quarterback as the years go on? I don't know. I mean, maybe within the next year. Well, obviously, I think if he is able to continue this clip, he has to finish out the year. I'm wrong on that. We're going to be wrong in this industry anyway. Maybe next year, but I think eventually you do have to think towards the future because Geno's not going to be able to. I mean, he's been a veteran. He's been around the league for a while. How long he's able to sustain this play, how much do you want to roll the dice on that? So I think eventually you do have to look into a replacement, but I don't think it's as urgent as like taking one of your highest picks.
Right.
In this year's draft, at least.
Yeah, it gives some hope for Pete Carroll's statement about 10 wins this season. So we'll see. Moving on to some league news here. On October 7th, the NFLPA wanted immediate changes to the concussion protocol. So the union agreed upon changes to the protocol to go into effect this last weekend. Tua is actually also seeking specialists. He has been seeking outside concussion specialists, but there are no imminent plans by Miami to place him on IR. I know there's been some talks with some medical professionals where they think that maybe it's time to hang up the helmet and call it a career, but as always, your health is more important than a game. So anywho, moving on here. On October 8th, protocols were applied for Tua. Investigation reveals medical staff followed steps of protocol, but NFL and NFLPA agree that protocols needed modification. They reached an agreement on the protocols. The amended concussion protocols will take effect starting Sunday with a focus on ataxia. I hope I'm saying that right. And do you actually have any more insight as to what that means? Is that just like the reflection or like the reaction that happened to Tua when he got hurt?
I'm not entirely sure about any of that too much. I know I think a lot of it was the quick turnaround. And I don't know. It's really interesting with the NFL because I'm sure you saw the newer helmets that I think Zeke Elliott has one of them. There's stuff that the NFL has been doing, but I don't know if it all I don't know how much of it takes on the issue of like the brain injuries head on. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff with the CTE, with certain players. It's really interesting, the protocol side of it, because you'd hope and figure that would be like baseline one is having these protocols in place to avoid any of these injuries. And then like the helmets and then like tackling rules and all that sort of stuff follows. But no, I'm not. too ingrained into that. It's just interesting because I know Teddy Bridgewater, who's actually backing up to in Miami, was like under older protocols this past weekend would have been good to go for the rest of the game. But with these newer ones, they took him out. They kept him out, and they said, nope, we're not with these new protocols. You're out of the game.
And I mean, that's all probably learned from letting Tua come back in for that second half. So I'm glad they're taking steps to avoid their players getting hurt. Let's move on to some more news here. Roger Goodell wants an NFL division in Europe. The league commissioner hinted at a 4-team European division for the league and wasn't joking. There's no question that London could support not just one franchise, I think 2 franchises, he says. Any thoughts on the expansion?
We look at the Seahawks like mileage this year in terms of travel, right? And then there's the thing with the Steelers where they don't leave the East Coast time zone. I'm like, so these teams, with Seattle already being like in the utmost corner of the country and just being on its own, we have to deal with the Seahawks have to deal with a lot of travel. I can only imagine what that would be like, because I know it says division, right? And that quote, he only says not one, but 2 franchises. It would have to be a division so that they could play up against each other a bunch, so that, you don't have to worry too much about that interdivision travel. Because you can't just, relocate, I'm not picking on Jacksonville, but say Jacksonville, you take Jacksonville and move Jacksonville to London. Then one team in Europe has to do all that cross-Atlantic travel. It's just really interesting because the NFL has hinted at something like this a lot. They do a lot of the international games, right? There were some of the games the Raiders have played like in Mexico. There's Munich this year in Germany that the Seahawks are playing in, right? There's always the London games.
Right.
So it's just really interesting to see and then there's the thing we saw this past offseason where the Seahawks like international area is like Canada or something. I think Tampa Bay or Green Bay have like China. So they're like the NFL is trying to go international, which is interesting.
Yeah.
How much stock I take into a division in Europe, I don't know. Because then like you're expanding by one division. So which conference is the AFC or the NFC? And then are you making another division somewhere else? There's a bunch of like logistical stuff where I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking. No, it's interesting. It's funny to hear that, but it also is like, I guess the NFL is more serious about international expansion than I really thought. I never thought we'd get to this point.
It'd be interesting for sure. I did watch this weekend's game in London, and it kind of felt like they were in Lambeau Field for a while because you could hear the "Go Pack Go" chants. But also speaking on that, the Giants had to travel a lot less of a distance than the Packers, so the Packers were a little less excited about having to go. But yeah, anywho, we'll see. I don't see it for like happening in the foreseeable future, but you never know. Moving back to our Seahawks here, they now sit at a 2-3 record, and we mentioned the run defense, so it'll be interesting to have the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray, who's kind of a running quarterback, in town on the 16th at 1:05 p.m. So we'll see how our defense does.
Yeah, that'll be, like you said, that's a big game. I know they got James Conner, and they used to have David Johnson. That's a guy I whenever we play Arizona, I'd get nightmares about. But yeah, like you're saying with Kyler Murray, that's a guy that you're going to have to worry about containing. So I don't know. That'll be really tough there. It's really interesting with the NFC West. Because the Rams are 2-3, the Cardinals are 2-3. There's like nobody that's dominating the division right now, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that all plays out. And like you said, gotta contain Kyler Murray. I feel like that's base number one.